Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're putting on our detective hats to crack a case that's happening inside our very own bodies. We're talking about our internal wiring, our nerves, and what happens when things start to go wrong. You know that feeling, right? That weird pins and needles sensation in your hand or a patch on your foot that suddenly feels numb. Maybe you've tried to pick something up and your grip just isn't there. Well, those feelings aren't just random annoyances. They're actually the first clues in a much bigger mystery. See, your body is basically running on a massive, incredibly complex electrical grid. Your nervous system sends signals from your brain to, well, everywhere else. And those strange symptoms, that's like static on the line. It's a clear sign that somewhere in that network, the signal is getting garbled or lost. So the question is, how do you find the fault? This is where doctors become electrical detectives. They have a special toolkit that lets them actually listen in on your body's electrical signals to trace the problem right back to its source. The whole process has a fancy name, electrodiagnostic testing, or EDX for short. So, what's actually in this detective's kit? It really comes down to two main tools that work together to give doctors the full story. Okay, so first up we have nerve conduction studies, or NCS. The best way to think about this is like checking the highway. Doctors send a tiny electrical pulse down a nerve to see how fast and how strong the signal is. It tells them if the road is clear or if there's a problem. Then you've got electromyography, or EMG. If the NCS is the highway, the EMG is like listening to the engine. A tiny needle listens to the electrical chatter inside your muscles to see if they're getting the right commands from the nerve. And these tests can be incredibly precise. Take the blink reflex test, for example. You've got electrodes placed near your eyes, a tiny, harmless pulse stimulates a nerve near your eyebrow, and a machine measures the exact timing of your blink reflex down to the millisecond. It's a super detailed way to test that whole communication loop. All right, so the detective has gathered all these electrical clues, these waveforms on a screen. Now for the really cool part, figuring out what these signals are actually telling us. To decode the clues, we have to talk about something called myelin. Think of your nerve as an electrical wire. Myelin is the rubbery insulation wrapped around it. It's this fatty coating that lets the electrical signal jump down the nerve at incredible speeds. If that insulation gets damaged, the signal slows right down. And this is absolutely crucial. These tests can tell the difference between two main kinds of nerve damage. First, there's axonal loss. This is when the wire itself is frayed or cut. On the test, this shows up as a much weaker signal. Then there's demyelination. That's when the insulation is damaged. The signal is still strong, but it's super slow. Knowing which one it is helps a doctor figure out what's causing the problem. And get this, it's not just about what you can see on a screen. The EMG machine is hooked up to a speaker, and with certain muscle diseases, the electrical activity makes these crazy, distinct sounds. Some have been described as sounding like a dive bomber plane, or even marching soldiers. I mean, can you imagine? You can literally hear the problem. So with all this incredible data, the detective can start to zero in on the crime scene, narrowing the search from, the entire body down to one specific spot. Doctors actually have a clever guiding principle for this, called the Willie Sutton rule. Sutton was a famous bank robber, and when a reporter asked him why he robbed banks, he supposedly said, "Because that's where the money is." For a doctor, this means you start the test right where the symptoms are. If your hand is numb, they start testing the nerves in your arm. Go where the problem is. It's just smart. And the level of precision here is just mind-blowing. To find the exact spot where a nerve is getting pinched, doctors will do these inching studies. They literally stimulate the nerve centimeter by centimeter up your arm or leg, just watching the screen for that one exact spot where the signal suddenly hits a roadblock and slows down. And today, the detective's toolkit has another game-changing tool, ultrasound. So while the electrical tests measure the function of the nerve, how well it's working, ultrasound lets the doctor physically see its structure. They can look for swelling, see if it's being squished by a cyst, or if there's scar tissue. It's the other half of the story. So, after gathering all of these clues, the electrical signals, the physical images, the detective is ready to solve the case. But a diagnosis is only really made when every single clue points in the same direction. And that gets to the real heart of this entire process. These tests aren't just numbers on a screen that spit out an answer. They're seen as a direct extension of the physical exam. It's all about confirming what the doctor suspects after actually talking to you and examining you, which leads to a cardinal rule in this field. Because the tests are so sensitive, they can pick up tiny little blips that might not mean anything. And experts will tell you it's a huge mistake to diagnose something serious based on a minor finding, especially if it doesn't fit with the rest of the story. It takes a ton of judgment and experience. So in the end, a confident diagnosis is only made when all the puzzle pieces fit together perfectly. The story you tell the doctor, what they find in the physical exam, the results from the electrical tests, and what the ultrasound shows, they all have to point to the exact same conclusion. When they all snap into place like that, that's when you know you've cracked the case. It's really an amazing process, this fusion of human biology and detective work. By learning to speak the body's own electrical language, we can solve these incredibly complex mysteries. And it just makes you wonder, if we can already decode these signals to find damage, what other secret codes is our nervous system just waiting for us to figure out? Thanks for joining us on The Explainer.